She broke the most sacred promise of her life, to stay alive. It was a Sunday morning when Elena woke up and felt that something was wrong. It wasn't pain. It wasn't fear. It was the cold certainty that she had crossed a line that should never have been crossed. And the worst part? She knew exactly what she had done. She knew she had broken the only promise she swore she would never break. The promise she made to herself, to her family, to God. But she was alive. And that was all that mattered in that moment. Or was it? I'm going to tell you a story that will make you question everything you believe about loyalty, survival, and the price we pay for our choices. Because in the end, when life puts you against the wall, when fear grips your throat and darkness seems inevitable, what would you do? Would you keep your word? Or would you do the unthinkable to save yourself? Elena had to answer that question. And her answer changed everything. Elena was always known as the woman of promises. Since childhood, she learned from her grandmother that a word given was sacred, that making a promise was like signing a contract with the universe. She grew up on that principle, built her entire life on that foundation. When she was 17, she made the most important promise of her existence. She was sitting beside the hospital bed where her younger sister, Sophia, was fighting a rare disease that was consuming her body day after day. Sophia was only 12 years old, with huge green eyes that seemed to see beyond the physical world, and a smile that lit up even the darkest corridors of that cold hospital. That night, Sophia held Elena's hand with a strength that didn't seem possible for someone so fragile. She looked into her sister's eyes and said something Elena would never forget. "Promise me, Lena. Promise you'll really live. No matter what happens, no matter how much it hurts, you promise you'll always choose life. That you'll never give up. That you'll never let anything stop you from living every second I can't live." Elena promised. She promised with tears streaming down her face, with a broken heart, with absolute certainty that she would keep that promise until the last day of her existence. Sophia died 3 days later, and Elena spent the next 20 years of her life honoring that promise in every way possible. She lived intensely. She traveled to places people only dreamed of knowing. She loved without fear, even when it meant getting hurt. She built a brilliant career as a documentary photographer, capturing stories of life, struggle, human survival in the most unlikely places on the planet. Elena was the woman who said yes to life. Always. No exceptions. It was her code. It was her religion. It was the legacy she carried from the sister she lost too soon. But then came the first problem. A problem that started so small that Elena didn't even notice when it entered her life. It started with an invitation. A seemingly harmless invitation from a journalist friend named Marco, who was investigating a human trafficking network operating on the border between 3 countries. Marco needed someone to document the story, someone brave enough to enter dangerous places, someone who knew how to capture the raw truth without filters. Elena was the perfect person. And of course, she accepted. How could she refuse? Saying yes was who she was. Living was what she had promised. The investigation began like so many others. Interviews with victims who had managed to escape. Secret conversations with sources who demanded anonymity. Photos taken from afar, always carefully, always calculating the risks. For months, Elena and Marco dove into that dark underworld, unraveling a criminal operation that moved millions and destroyed lives with frightening coldness. But the deeper they went, the more dangerous it became. The threats started subtle. A car that always appeared in the same place. A stranger who knew too many details about Elena's personal life. Anonymous messages warning that she should stop before it was too late. Elena didn't stop, because stopping would mean giving up. And giving up wasn't in her vocabulary. Not after the promise she made to Sophia. So she continued. She kept photographing. She kept documenting. She kept exposing the truth, even when every cell in her body screamed for her to run. And it was exactly that determination that led her to the second problem. The problem that would change everything. It was a Friday night when Elena received a call from Marco. His voice was trembling, desperate, completely different from the confident man she knew. "Elena, they got someone. Someone very close. And they're using that person to stop us." Elena's heart froze. "Who, Marco? Who did they get?" The silence on the other end of the line seemed to last an eternity. Then he said it. "Your niece, Elena. They got Camila." Camila was 15 years old. She was the daughter of Elena's older brother, a man who worked as a doctor and who always tried to keep the family away from the dangers Elena embraced in her profession. Camila was a sweet, intelligent girl, full of dreams and plans for the future. And now she was in the hands of ruthless criminals because of Elena's work. The guilt was immediate, suffocating, devastating. How had this happened? How had she let her passion for truth put someone she loved at risk? The instructions came that same night. A message from an unknown number with a clear and brutal demand. Elena had 72 hours to destroy all the material she had collected, to convince Marco to abandon the investigation and to disappear. If she did that, Camila would be released without a scratch. If she didn't, well, they didn't need to finish the threat. The implication was crystal clear. Elena had to choose. The truth that she and Marco had risked everything to expose, the justice that dozens of victims deserved, or her niece's life. 62 hours to decide between her purpose and her family. Elena didn't sleep that night. She sat on the floor of her apartment, surrounded by boxes of files, flash drives with thousands of photos, detailed notes from months of investigation. Each image told a story. Each document represented someone's hope of finally seeing justice done. Destroying that would be like erasing the voices of people who had already been silenced so many times. It would be betraying everything she had fought for over the years. It would be breaking the promise she made to Sophia, because part of truly living was fighting for the truth, no matter the cost. But Camila was just a child. An innocent child who was paying for Elena's mistakes. And what if something happened to her? What if Elena chose the investigation and lost her niece? How would she live with that? How would she look into her brother's eyes? How would she keep breathing knowing she had blood on her hands? The hours passed like sand slipping through fingers. 50 hours, 40 hours, 30 hours, and Elena still hadn't made her choice. Marco called constantly, saying they couldn't give in, that if they destroyed the material, they would be betraying dozens of victims, that criminals didn't keep promises anyway. He had rational, logical, true arguments. But Marco didn't have a 15-year-old niece who had been kidnapped. Marco didn't have to look at the reflection in the mirror and see an aunt who had put a child in mortal danger. Then came the moment of climax. There were 12 hours left before the deadline when Elena received a photo. A photo of Camila sitting in a chair, blindfolded, visibly scared but still whole. And along with the photo, a message that said, "Last chance, Elena. You choose. But choose quickly." Elena looked at the photo for long minutes. She looked at the files scattered on the floor. She looked at the bracelet she wore on her wrist, the same bracelet Sophia wore in the hospital before she died, with a small pendant that read "Live." And then, Elena made her decision. She took all the flash drives, all the documents, all the photos she had taken over months. She put everything in a large backpack. She called Marco and said she was going to do what the kidnappers demanded. Marco shouted, begged, argued, but Elena hung up the phone. She knew what she had to do. She knew she was going to break the most sacred promise she had ever made. Because in the end, truly living also meant protecting those you love, even if it cost everything. Elena drove to the location the criminals indicated. An abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of the city, the kind of place that appears in horror movies and that no one imagines exists in real life. She entered with the backpack on her back, heart beating so hard it felt like it would explode. There were 3 men waiting. Men with hard faces, cold eyes, who represented everything she had fought against for years. One of them extended his hand. The material. Elena handed over the backpack. They checked quickly, confirming that everything was there. Then they did something Elena didn't expect. They opened a door at the back of the warehouse, and there was Camila, still blindfolded, trembling, but alive. One of the men cut the bindings and pushed the girl toward Elena. "Take your niece and disappear. If we see your name in any report about this, we'll be back. And next time, it won't be so civilized." Elena hugged Camila so hard the girl could barely breathe. They ran out of that warehouse, got in the car, and Elena drove without stopping to her brother's house. The family was destroyed, relieved, in shock. Elena's brother could barely speak, alternating between thanking her and accusing her of putting his daughter in danger from the start. Elena accepted everything. She accepted the guilt, the anger, the disappointment, because she knew all of it was true. In the following days, Marco called several times, saying they could start over, that they had hidden backups, that they could still expose that criminal network. But Elena said no. For the first time in 20 years, since she promised Sophia she would always say yes to life, Elena said no. She wasn't going to continue. She wasn't going to risk. She wasn't going to put anyone else in danger. She had broken her promise, and the weight of it was almost unbearable. For weeks, Elena could barely get out of bed. She felt she had betrayed Sophia, that she had wasted her sister's sacrifice, that she had thrown away years of important work. But every time she closed her eyes, she saw Camila's face. She saw the girl trembling, scared, but alive. And she realized she had made the only possible choice. Then, 3 months after that horrible day at the warehouse, something happened. Elena was at home when she received a letter. A letter with no return address, handwritten in uncertain handwriting. She opened it carefully and began to read. The letter was from one of the victims she had interviewed during the investigation, a woman named Rosa, who had escaped from the trafficking network years ago. Rosa wrote saying she had heard Elena had abandoned the investigation. And she said more. She said she understood. She said that if Elena had to choose between exposing the criminals or saving someone she loved, she had made the right choice. Because in the end, Rosa wrote, one person's life is worth more than any story. And choosing to protect those we love isn't breaking a promise to live. It's fulfilling the most important promise of all, the promise that love matters more than anything else. Elena read that letter 3 times. And the third time, she cried. She cried for Sophia. She cried for Camila. She cried for all the victims she couldn't help. But she also cried with relief. Because she finally understood something that had taken 20 years to comprehend. Really living doesn't mean saying yes to everything. It doesn't mean never backing down. It doesn't mean sacrificing everything and everyone in the name of a principle. Really living means making impossible choices and learning to live with them. It means understanding that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is choose love over glory. Choose safety over truth. Choose the life of those you love above anything else. Elena didn't return to documentary photography after that. She didn't return to dangerous places, to risky investigations, to the adrenaline of exposing truths no one wants to see. Instead, she began photographing weddings, birthdays, simple moments of ordinary families. And she found a different beauty in it. A quiet, safe, true beauty. Every week, Elena visited Camila. They talked, laughed, and Elena watched the girl grow, make new plans, dream new dreams. And every time she saw Camila's smile, Elena knew she had made the right choice. Because yes, she had broken the promise she made to Sophia. But in doing so, she had fulfilled an even greater promise. The promise that life, especially the life of those we love, is sacred, and that sometimes saving yourself means saving someone else first. Elena learned that survival isn't just about staying alive. It's about staying human. It's about keeping your heart beating not just physically, but emotionally. It's about choosing love, even when it means giving up everything you fought for. In the end, Elena realized something profound about promises. They are important. They are sacred, yes, but they are not absolute. Because life is not absolute. Life is complicated, confusing, full of impossible choices where there is no right answer. And perhaps the greatest promise we can make is not to others, but to ourselves. The promise that we will do the best we can, with what we have, in the moment we are in. And that when we have to choose between keeping our word and saving those we love, we will choose love. Always. Elena still wears Sophia's bracelet every day. She still looks at that pendant that reads, "Live," and feels the weight of that promise. But now she understands that living isn't about being perfect. It's not about never breaking promises. It's about making choices that let you sleep at night. Choices that let you look in the mirror and recognize who you see. Choices that let you continue being human in a world that constantly pushes us to become less. And you? If you were in Elena's place, what would you do? Would you keep a sacred promise even if it cost the life of someone you love? Or would you break your word to save who matters? Think about it. Because one day, maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but one day life will put you against the wall. It will make you choose between what you promised and what you love. And on that day, you'll discover who you really are. You'll discover what really matters. And you'll learn, as Elena learned, that sometimes the strongest thing we can do is admit we're human, that we have limits, and that some loves are more important than any promise.